Welcome back to Russell's Reaction Zone. Hey, today is something that is super important in our communities. I've lived in Chicago, Illinois. Now I live in Southern California, but both of the cities that I have lived in have been sanctuary cities. And so that's what today is talking about. Today's reaction video is talking about specifically Chicago and how they have handled their migrant crisis, and how the people are reacting to the benefits that the migrants are getting versus the benefits that the people who have been suffering there for many, many years have been getting. So let's get into the video. This is at a rally in front of South Shore High School, south side of Chicago. See what we got.
Are not we are not upset with the individuals who are being allowed to cross the borders into America.
Hear that? This is clearly not about the validity of undocumented persons. This is strictly about, and it should strictly be about, the ability of the city to take care of its own and to find money for its own when there is a need versus coming up with $600 million out of the blue that they would never set aside for the citizens of the black and brown communities of Chicago. Let me keep going.
Let me make that very clear because people get it confused.
They get it
We
confused.
are, however, outraged with the government's response to how the government's response and our elected officials' blatant disregard to the local crisis black families and children are facing now in our city.
They're facing it right now, this very second. I don't know if you have been to the south side or the west side of Chicago, but these are two parts of Chicago that time forgot. You drive through the south side of Chicago, you drive through the west side. In most black and brown neighborhoods, or let me say it differently, in neighborhoods of high concentrations of black people, high concentrations of brown people, you will find high concentrations of poverty. And this is why politics being local is so important. They always say all politics are local. This is why it's important to see who you're going to get behind, whether it's Trump or Kamala Harris, right? Your vice president, Waltz versus J.D. Vance. Okay, that's important. But this right here affects your everyday walk and talk of your life. All politics are local. Remember that.
It is disingenuous and highly disrespectful to come into neighborhoods that have suffered decades of disinvestment, redlining, poverty, and violence to tell them you're taking resources away only to give it to another group of people that you allowed to cross the border illegally.
All right, I got to touch on that. So here's the issue. If Chicago was taking care of its own, if Chicago had invested in the south side and the west side of Chicago as opposed to divestment, if Chicago had not closed 53 schools, I think Rahm Emanuel was the mayor 10 years ago or so, if he wouldn't have closed 53 schools, if they would put some grocery stores in the community, create an environment of growth, they wouldn't be having this issue. They'd say, bring them on. Land of the free, home of the brave, bring them over here so that they can be part of this. However, they're not taking care of their own. They have not been able to find resources for their own. And all of a sudden, you find $600 million for people who obviously need to be taken care of. I'm not arguing that point. But for people who just got here recently, undocumented, or as some people would say, illegally. Let's keep going.
How dare you put these poor people against us, especially because the very reason you claim they're here to seek asylum is the same reason and terror and injustice black people face today.
That's right.
Chicago is working on an issue without addressing the current issue that it has with the communities that are suffering.
That's the point. They have forgotten. They have forgotten. I could say this about every Democratic run city, that they have forgotten or they have gotten used to poverty, concentrated areas of poverty with black and brown people. They've gotten used to it. And these are blue cities with minority run minority mayors, minority leadership, minority city council, and you find high concentrations of poverty for the people that you are supposed to serve. And you can't find any money for it. In Chicago, it is unsafe to walk down the street so that some of these young kids can get to school safely. This is ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. And this is why I'm all about, I went from Democratic to independent and I don't know which way I'm going to vote. But I promise you this, on the local level, you better believe I am not voting for anybody that's blue at all. Anybody. Because they are all members of the black and brown community, specifically Los Angeles, Chicago, and probably I would even say New York as well. But they are city council persons full of color in some of the most crime-ridden cities that they don't have money to take care of the homelessness and the poverty in their own city. And then all of a sudden you find $600 million for people who just got here? Where was that money when the natives needed, the native population? This drives me absolutely crazy. It drives me crazy. And it's time to get off of the plantation, the Democratic plantation, where they just don't have to earn your vote. You vote blue all day, every day, and you get the same thing over and over and over again in every blue city. Look it up.
And we're seeing resources fly out to help, but we're not getting that same type of support
No, you're
at the
not.
magnitude we're seeing now. And to expect us to foot the bill and hand over our already limited resources, public parks and school buildings that have been unjustly closed in the first place. Now you're putting a strain on our police officers and stations, obstructing their ability to do their jobs, serve our community, and our community to go into police stations to receive services. In addition, it's inhumane to welcome people only to have them sleeping on floors in buildings and in tents that cannot withstand the wind of Chicago. Brandon Johnson ran on the promise that he would listen to our community.
He sure did.
And in the beginning of this crisis stated that he would not re-traumatize those communities that are still suffering from the impact of school closing, red line, and violence. We are here today demanding that the city of Chicago and
Here's the point with that. She's basically saying in these poor communities, we already have our built-in struggles. So now you're going to add one more right on top of it, right on top. Why not send them to more affluent communities? More affluent communities. Guess why they won't do that? Because the more affluent communities ain't having that. They are not having it. The people ain't having it. The leadership is not having it. And so where do they go? They go to the place where people have just been run over for years, forgotten for years. So they go to the brown and black community, high concentrations of poverty, and just drop them boop, right in the center.
And we kick things off with a look at the competing messages.
All right, I'm tripping. Anyway, so I don't know what I just did. But here's the point. The point is that it's time to do something different. It's time to do something different. It's time to do something different. Excuse me. We have for far too long voted for the same people, just in a different suit. We have supported the same congresspersons, just in a different last name. We have supported the same policies. And what have we gotten for it? New York, Chicago, LA, high concentrations of black and brown poverty, high concentrations of black and brown crime rates, high concentration of food deserts within those black and brown communities. And who's in leadership there? That's the point. Who's in leadership? Being a person who's been in business and management for the last 15 to 20 years, the numbers mean something. The numbers mean something. And if you have the same problem from administration to administration, from Democratic to the next Democrat, if you have that same issue, then why don't you try something different? Why don't you try something different? Just because the people that you would be trying something different with may not look like you? Who cares? At this point, what do you have to lose? What? It can't get any worse. I mean, it cannot get any worse. I mean, at least if the right was in power, I promise you they would send the National Guard into those black and brown communities so that the violence and the crime rate can be addressed immediately. This is acute care at this point. Critical care. Enough is enough, people. Enough is enough. Anyway, Russell's reactions. Please like, please subscribe, please share. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. Drop some comments down below if you want to see more content like this, or if there's anything else that you'd like to hear me address. I got a wealth of information up here, and I'm dying to get it out. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to me, and we'll talk to you real soon. Thanks.